female, income, perhaps neighborhood, I'm not sure, but not their name. And the mayor obviously was explaining that, with mad cow disease, they took red meat out of the schools. They're thinking maybe it's time to bring red meat back, and so they sent a survey off, should we bring red meat back to the schools? They asked, what's the biggest priorities? And he said, who would have known it? Parking. And what they do is that, an academic might look at this and say, well, it's not scientific, oh my gosh. But the mayor, the council, they value the input. They're the ones that matter in terms of whether this is scientific or not. And so what they do with the demographics is they say, well, here's the raw result. And then based on what we know of the census, if we tried to make it more representative, here's how it would be different, male versus female. They might strengthen income, obviously fewer low-income people will be using this, so their results could be weighted more strongly. So it gives them a sense, and they also use it just to send an email or a survey to the women in the service, because the federal government, the national government, was cutting back on services for women, pregnant women, or sorry, women who just had children, and the city just wanted to ask, should we do anything more for you the week you return from the hospital? And so the ability at almost no cost to quickly gather that input, that's fabulous use of the tools. Webcasting, so video, right? Video and audio. I mentioned that the Minnesota representative had the video. Here we have a counselor in the UK. It makes it more personal. I mean, that's that multimedia aspect, making it more likely that someone who runs into this council member on the street who didn't know who they were and never met him before said, hey, I saw your video. I heard your voice. I saw the way your face moved. You built some trust, I think, with that medium. And it's a great example of extending the council member directory, basically, with a little video. Seattle, in the United States, one of the reasons why many more government meetings are webcast is that for 20 years now, they've had a cable channel. I mean, getting a meeting on television is really important, whether it's cable TV or broadcast. That's going to be, people are sitting on their couch, they're flipping channels. What's this? So, these actually can be pretty popular with some people. They'll watch a full council meeting. You'd be surprised. Now with webcasting, then they can create that option, obviously, on the web. But more importantly, it's the archives. You didn't have to watch when it was live. You could watch it any time. And then they're also finding that it's not just about putting meetings online. It's about putting other forms of video. Because they have a channel, they might have a special, half-hour interview program with the recycling coordinator in the city. And so they put up little special programs. And it's the ones that aren't the meetings that actually get the most traffic. But they also have a tool that allows you to go to a meeting and actually click onto an agenda item. And I think you can even click onto a speaker and see just that little piece of video. Because, having to watch a 3-hour video because you care about 5 minutes, it's not exactly the best use of time. So the ability to navigate into the video, it's a big issue to sort out. But they claim they have software to share. So I'll get you connected with them. They're willing to share what they've done with others. And then for the UK government, I've done a project called Democaster. And here we're working with audio. So for community groups, for small town councils, the folks that will never have a video camera, how do we get them onto the web? And so in this case, it's audio combined with webcam images, the lowest cost thing. So it just takes a picture every 5 seconds, or whatever you set it at. And so it's kind of a fun project, and then it's available on demand afterwards. I've also found that necessity is one of the greatest indicators of whether people use these tools in politics and in democracy. In India, there's a district manager who oversees a number of villages, and because there often aren't roads between these villages, only gets the village once a year, perhaps, or less. To inaugurate this new network of solar-powered internet cafe stations, basically. The cafe in town, or the tea room, would be the one house that had 2 rooms. And so they have actually had like a low bandwidth wireless, because they could go like 40 kilometers or something. So it was like the speed of a modem, but they actually created software that allowed video and audio. People who are illiterate could bring their goat, and there's pictures of this, and communicate with an agricultural extension person to get advice about how to treat the abscessed tooth on the goat, So it's more used for those kinds of things, actually, and people talking. But here in this case, they had a town meeting. So you had 8 villages at the same time with a chat and a discussion, and they talked about bus services, well, actually the lack of roads, and distribution of seed and other types of things. Now, I did discover, I actually commissioned a case study on this and discovered that this was a one-time event. It wasn't integrated into what they did over and over again. So I want to be upfront about that. But I tell you, I've never seen an interactive town meeting using video in any well-wired place. I mean, we have broadband like crazy in the United States. Broadband, there's a lot of broadband here. Have we ever used the tools this way? I'm not aware of it. And I think it's a great example that we might want to do both in broadband-rich places and not just places that are just barely connected. Another area, we're talking about trust. In South Korea, they've had a big trouble with corruption around services. So with e-services, one of the nice things about it is the ability to sort of streamline services so that people don't think they're getting ripped off. And that's a different way to build trust. I think it's really important. Here they have about 80 different services that are in the system, and so you can see where it is. And in the past, you might apply for a liquor license for your cafe, right, to sell alcohol. And you'd pay what they call an express fee to move it from one civil servant's desk to the next desk, and a small bribe. And now with the system, the mayor can actually see where every application is, and so can the citizen, and so it makes it very difficult to extract an express fee in the process. Once I actually heard, and when I went to Seoul, I asked them about this, so that I don't know if it's true, but I said, I saw a slide at a presentation, corruption has gone down 75%. And I thought, well, how did they measure the baseline? So it was kind of funny, but they basically felt that it had gone down a good amount. Another thing is counselors. I mean, we are in public life, or you are in public life. You've been given certain powers by the voters. And in some cases, they want you, the laws have been crafted to keep you ethical. They might require you to disclose contracts or relationships that might influence your votes. You might have a small budget. You might spend money on staff or on whatever, travel. In many cases, you have forms that you fill out, and if the media wants to see them, or if a citizen wants to see them, they go to an office, they go down a small hallway, and they sign on a little tablet, and they get the files, and they can look at them. They're legally public, but they're not online. And in many cases, those things will actually come online eventually. And the question is whether they come online because of a political scandal, or they come online because you say, well, it's public, let's put it out there and be in front of the game. In this case, I think the UK Parliament actually was in front of the game. They began putting out the office reports then of every member for how they spend their budget for their staffing and the like. In the US House, for example, all that stuff is there, but you have to go find it. Or in the Minnesota legislature, which is very accessible, you still have to go find it. And something to note, I think, that you can build trust through transparency, even if hardly any citizens actually look at it. Just the idea that it's there is a helpful thing. Now, when I was, a year and a half ago, I was in Iceland, and I was in Denmark, your neighbors, and I was asking, does anyone know of any local council that shares spending information? Because I'm used to seeing lots of budget proposals online. I mean, all the governors in the United States put out their proposed budget. But after the legislature and others mess with it, there's never ever a document that actually says in one place, here's how we actually decided to spend the information. Or there's never like much accountability to say, well, here's how we are spending it in the interim as we've promised. And I was, on that same trip, I ended up at a cities, World Summit on Cities in Lyon, France. And this very proud delegation from Turkey, Yalova, Turkey, gets up and they start describing their system. You can actually click onto it and find out how much money they have in the bank. You could see various tenders, citizen follow-up, and they had this thing called a wealth declaration, again, a concern about corruption. And so in this case, anytime the income or wealth went up or down 5%, they were required to update their form. And so this junior member of the cabinet, I believe, of the local cabinet, he drives a Mercedes 1987. So if he was driving a newer car, and it's not on the website, something's up. This is the mayor. The mayor has a lot more property. Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, they had an election in 2004, and the party that was very proud of this was no longer in power. And guess what happened? This was turned off. And actually, there's a site, I believe, in Flanders, is called The Color of Flanders, which had like 6 people working on consultations and interactive e-democracy activity, and it was very much sort of a child of the party in power. And the new party came in. I believe that project wasn't continued at the same level. It shows how important it is to sort of, if you're going to do something with these tools, build it into what they call the rule of law. Don't just have it be something you do voluntarily, build it into what has to happen when you leave and when no longer have power. Or think about it, if you're in the majority party, think about what happens, what don't you have access to when you're no longer the majority party, and what might you want to have access to in the long term, and think about it in that way, and not have e-democracy become a political tool that could be turned off. Something else you're beginning to see is what I call democracy or consultation portals. There's all these nifty little democracy things that are being built on across government websites. Some might be actually in the council itself, another might be in a ministry or an agency or a community group. And there's lots of things that are happening. Well, how does a citizen navigate democracy? I would look to the UK. A lot of them have basically like council and democracy sections that kind of create an umbrella to pull together all the different interactive type options, information about elections, you name it. A very appealing photo there of it's kind of a funny photo actually. Of people talking and being part of the process. Very important to pull together. I call it the democracy button. When I ran the state of Minnesota's portal, that's how I got into my e-government work, I had a button that said democracy. And when I left, that button just kind of disappeared. It took a while, but it just wasn't their focus. It was more services. And I think every government should have a democracy button on their homepage somewhere. So as we finish up here, this is edemocracy.org, that website that we created in 1994. What happened when the election was over was that we had this Minnesota politics discussion forum. People kept talking. We're like, oh. Because one of the problems online is content is very expensive to produce, whether it's paid for or volunteer driven. It takes a lot to write a nice article and to write a new one the next week and then a new one the next week. But with discussion, your audience basically is talking to one another and creating interesting content. So what we did actually in 1998 was take our statewide model for discussion. We took it local. We created this thing called the Minneapolis Issues Forum. There are now about 900 email addresses, close to probably 800 people subscribe to this discussion of local issues. The rules say sign your real name, you can only post twice a day. We use a lot of email in this discussion because the mayor's on there and a lot of media is on there and a lot of council members are on there, and they don't go to websites very often. So they're stuck there and they just get the messages, and the mayor even will post once in a while. And it happened to be that the current mayor actually was on the forum as a citizen and decided that he would run for election. And he actually announced his candidacy on the forum before he announced it at a press conference. And he's up for re-election now. And when the media tells you you're a force in politics, you must be somebody. So, and the key piece about this is the forum actually has an agenda-setting role in the media. And that helps democratize the access. Because 900 people out of 400,000 people who live in the city limits of Minneapolis, it's not a very big percentage. So you really want to make sure that it trickles out into the broader community. And really exciting, and Mary might have a few words about this, the UK government came to Minnesota and did some investigations and decided they wanted some of these issues forums, and so there are 2 pilot forums now in the UK. And we have new technology, group server, it's open source, and so we're creating now a global model for local e-democracy for discussion forums. And so if someone in the Netherlands would like to join our network, connect with us, we have a 60-page guidebook. You can do what you want and read that and do your own thing, or you could even join sort of I call it the Rotary of the 21st century, or the Lions Club of the 21st century, a way to have a citizen service club where citizens bring people together and work with the local council. And this is just how it works. Basically, it connects to what I call these secondary networks. I've sent email out and I got a call from the newspaper the next day saying, yeah, we saw that article. Or I've gotten a call from a city department. I raised the question about squirrels in my chimney, and what do I do if that happens again? And I got a call from Animal Control Division 3 weeks later saying, we're your government, we're here to help you, we understand you're having trouble with squirrels. When does the government call you out of the blue, And so someone in the mayor's office had forwarded my email and it floated around and got some better service. That was great. So, e-democracy, I mentioned as is, and the problem with sort of traditional politics using the tools just based on how they've always done things. It's a real problem. We really need to focus on how to use these tools to improve what I call the outcomes of the policy process. It's not good enough. It really isn't good enough just to increase the numbers. Because, yeah, we could have more surveys answered, more polls answered, but ultimately, does it help us make our community a better place? And that's a really high standard. We've got a lot of work to do. And that's one of the reasons why we need to communicate with each other and share lessons. Because if we can move beyond involvement based on numbers and have it be involvement based on outcomes and results, I mentioned results earlier, that was important. I mean, you need to have that connection be built in. A couple other problems that I've noticed and things that we can overcome is that you're not part of this crowd, but in most governments, they'll say, well, we must do e-services first and we will do democracy later. You don't have that choice. You are a democracy. You are a representative organization. And so you can't just be efficient. You can't just automate what you've always done, right or wrong. You basically do things more quickly. They call it doing things right. Efficiency, doing things right. But democracy is about effectiveness. It's about doing the right thing. And it might not be more efficient. It might take more time. These tools aren't traditional e-government tools that basically save time. Some things do. I mean, you get more information more quickly. You can respond more quickly. But in sometimes it may actually take more time. But that's what democracy is all about. And it's having sort of that right amount of interaction and activity that allow us to make better decisions. The other piece is that you're not preparing for the average amount of involvement. You need to think about flood levels of engagement. And to actually build on that term, I mean, if you look at what happened with Katrina in New Orleans, where are people going now to find about their missing loved ones, or more or less now it's missing pets, or what happened in my neighborhood? They're going to a website called Craigslist that has a New Orleans section that allows you to post lost and found notices, to post various messages. They're going to NOLA.com, which is a website of the major newspaper that has a forum for every parish, every community, every suburb around New Orleans. And people these forums were very inactive before the storm, before the flood. But when they had to use it, when they had to come together, where did they go? They went to the place that was defined based on geography, and it allowed them to interact. And so when we think about that, we need to think about, well, what is the flood level? What are the things that we could do, not just with interaction, but maybe with email, dealing with email overload? What do we do when we have a major crisis in our community? How do we have the tools to allow us to absorb that and allow people to feel like they're being listened to? The other piece is very sort of nebulous, but it's that idea of creating authoritative online spaces. What an online consultation is on a government website is a place where people who are competing in the community for different outcomes, perhaps, can see one another's arguments, can come to appreciate the complexity of the choice in front of the council, rather than just seeing themselves as an individual citizen complaining in a vacuum to a council member and having no clue about the fact that other people in the community might have a different, often well-reasoned opposing view. And so by creating on the government websites or on NGO websites or on community websites or on media websites, some of these authoritative places that actually allow people to communicate and to exchange and hold each other accountable. It's very important. I mentioned sharing lessons. That's what eVoices sounds like it's all about. That's what the UK local eDemocracy National Project is about. That's what I'm interested in, how we learn from each other. And as someone from Iceland once said to me, I've never heard of this term, eDemocracy. Isn't it just democracy? And that's when we know we've succeeded. So we don't call it eDemocracy. We drop the E and we just call it democracy. Thank you.